Hey patrons, it's me, it's Queen Auset-Heru, and thank you for joining me for another exciting edition of The Witch Trials. All right guys, now listen, today's movie is called The Love Witch, and we're putting it on trial, okay? This movie came out in 2016. The first thing I'm going to do is give you a little summary and tell you a little bit about the movie. And I'm not going to tell you everything. There are some spoilers though, but I'm not going to tell you the whole movie. Then I'm going to tell you what I did not like, the vices, and then I'm going to tell you the virtues, okay? First and foremost, this movie is about a love witch. It's about a woman who wants to find love, but she's very misguided. Her version of love is more of a fantasy. She has these notions of a Prince Charming riding up on a white horse and taking her off into the Casbah. We learn in the beginning of the film that she has murdered her husband, and she has murdered before. Basically, she uses magic to make a man fall in love with her, and then if he's not up to par, which he's never going to be because she's idealistic, then she kills him with magic, with potions basically. So in the very beginning of the film, she has just murdered her husband and she has left town. Apparently the cops were not able to find anything to pin it on her, but the cops know that she's done it. So she leaves. The high priestess of her coven has an apartment, a really nice apartment. I would love to stay in this apartment. But they have this apartment, and basically she takes over the apartment, and there is a woman who's like the property manager. So at the very beginning of the movie, she meets the property manager, and they're showing you through symbolism that she's a witch. She has tarot cards and they fall out, stuff like that. And then she gets there, she's in all red, her luggage is all red. And the woman who, is the property manager lets her in. And then after letting her in, they go have tea. And they start to have this very awkward conversation about women and love and how to make a man love you and all this other kind of stuff. And you get to see that her version of love is very warped. The woman she's talking to is even like, what is wrong with you? The woman is like in shock because she's talking about basically she's talking about like giving a man his fantasy and using that against him, basically using your feminine wiles against him. And it was like, what? Like, you're taking us back to the 1900s with this, man. So I have to tell you up front that I don't like this movie. This movie is awful. And the woman is supposed to be a Wiccan. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of Wiccans probably aren't this awful. Not even probably. I'm certain they aren't this awful. I'm certain there are some people like her too. But she's awful. As a character, her personality, she's just awful. She's just an awful individual. Very selfish, awful. And throughout the movie, we get to see her using her magic potions and using her, what does she use? Potions and like spells to get these men under her thumb, basically. It's really bad because these poor men, like, she kills them. If they're not up to par, and they're not, none of them can be, and she kills them all, including the property manager's husband. She seduces and kills him. I mean, she's just awful. She's an awful human being, and all of this is in the name of love. And I'm like, that's not love at all. That's not even close to love. And I think that might have been the person that did this movie. That might have been the point they were trying to point out. Anyway, so she goes through the movie killing men and seducing them. And at the end of the movie, she's finally landed this guy that she really wanted bad. And he's in the bed. He basically rejects her and she kills him. Okay? She stabs him in his heart. She didn't even bother using the potion because she tried to give him a potion and he wouldn't drink it. Because by that point, he already knew something about her was wrong, so he wouldn't drink it. So she stabs him in the heart instead. And just as she's finished, you know, stabbing him, she looks up and realizes that the painting that's on the wall that I think she painted, because she's painting in the movie, but there are other people painting. I think she painted that one. And it's a scene that is happening. Her stabbing someone in the heart, and it's her stabbing someone in the heart in the film. I mean, in the painting. So you get the impression like it's a prophecy, maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy, but you get like the impression like this was destined to happen. And you don't know what happens afterwards. If she goes to jail or whatever, the movie just cuts off. So I'm going to tell you first and foremost what it is that I disliked about this film. Now, I always tell you the virtues and the vices based on witchcraft. Can we really do these things is the bottom line. There is not one vice in this movie. Everything that she did, I have done or know how to do. Bottom line. I've never killed anybody. Never did that and never will do that. But as far as like using crystals, using tarot cards, using love magic, using poppets, a lot of stuff you're going to hear me talk about, I have done or know how to do. So a lot of the things everything in here, I'm not even going to say a lot of things, everything in here can be done. Okay? There was no sleight of hand. There was no special effects. There's no flying around. You know, there's none of that old crazy Hollywood stuff. This is straight up real witchcraft. So I love the movie for that. I love it for that. This is the only movie we've ever had on this particular Witch Trials video series that did not have not one fake aspect. All of this could really happen if you're skilled enough. So that's the first thing I want to say. So I can't say it's a vice, but I can tell you two things I didn't like. Number one, the acting in this movie is awful. The acting is awful and the script is awful. But the cinematography, the costumes, the hair is really good. I love the camera angles. It's supposed to be retro, and it is very retro in the camera angles and the things like that. I like that aspect of it. But the acting is awful. The main character is awful. It's like a lot of overacting, a lot of over dramatization, and that could have been what they were going for because they're going for this retro kind of thing, but it just doesn't look good. It looks awful. The main character's acting is awful. I went to school for drama. I've seen freshmen with more talent than this woman. The acting was awful. Now, I gotta be fair to her. They might have told her to play it like that, so that might not have been her fault. But it's awful. At one point, the cop punches another cop, and it's the fakest punch I've ever seen in my life. But it does look like those retro punches from the 60s and 70s movies. So I'm thinking maybe they did this awful acting on purpose, which I still can't excuse it. Even if it was done on purpose, it's awful. The script is like, the writing, I'm not going to say that the writing was better than the acting. I will give that. But it just sounded to me like it could have had a little bit of help. So those are the only things I really didn't like. But the cinematography was amazing. The hair, the set design, the costumes, the accuracy of the witchcraft, all that kind of stuff. Whoever researched the script to do, you know, the things they were going to do in the movie, this person knows witchcraft. This person is a witch, or this person sat down with somebody or read some books or something. This person did their homework. So I have to give them that. And the last thing I didn't like was the main character. Not only was her acting awful, she's an awful person, the character, not the actual actress. The character is an awful person. She's childish. She's selfish. She doesn't care about these men. She just uses her femininity and her potions and her magic to make them fall in love with her, and then murders them when she sees that it's not up to par. And I'm looking like, wow, chick, really? And I mean, I'm not gonna say that doing love magic, I'm against it, because I'm not. I've done it. I do it. I'm not against love magic. I don't think it takes your free will. I think you have to actually like the person for it to actually work. So I don't think it takes your free will. So I'm not against it. But that's a big debate in the pagan community. So you might talk to somebody else and they'll say the exact opposite. Okay, that's a personal idea. That's a personal opinion. But that withstanding, okay, you manipulated them, you got them to fall in love with you, but then you murder them when they're not up to par. That's the part that bothered me. And she had no remorse at all. Like the one guy, she was like, oh, he's such a pussy, he's such a punk. He's in there crying, because he was in there crying. Whatever she gave him, he had a bad reaction to it, is really what happened. And he was crying, and then it made him have a heart attack, and he died. And she buries him in the backyard. I was like, are you serious? She just buries him and then leaves him and takes his car and goes back to town. And then she does it again. And then the woman who was the property manager, she seduces her husband and doesn't kill him, but drives him to commit suicide when she's tired of being with him. I mean, she's just awful. Her attitude, her behavior, she is awful. And I'm sure there are people like her. I hate the fact that she called herself a Wiccan, because I'm sure that Wiccans are like looking at her like, wow. I'm sure it is Wiccans like her, but it's not a good portrayal, you know? Like, I was like, wow, they could at least had a good Wiccan and a bad Wiccan. Maybe somebody else that kind of buffered her energy. But the other Wiccans, they weren't necessarily bad, but they were just like really, they were really goofy and weird. Like, they weren't represented well at all. And I thought that was a little unfair, because not even a little, a lot unfair, because I know Wiccans. I've read Wiccan material because I really like their stuff. And the ones I know are not that. I mean, maybe there are some, yeah, because I haven't met every Wiccan in the world. But the ones I've met, I was like, they horribly misrepresented them, and they represented the bad ones. They did not represent the other normal ones at all. So that's what I didn't like about the movie. But neither one of those things have anything to do with witchcraft. As far as witchcraft is concerned, this movie gets 100%. Never in the history of this video series has anything got 100%. So let me tell you what happened in the movie that I liked. I like a lot. Number one, they showed nude rituals. Yes, we do nude rituals. Yes, I do them. Yes, I have done them, and I'll do them again. Now, I'm a solitary, so I do my rituals by myself. So it's not as bad, you know, it's not as, you know, you're not as self-conscious when you're naked by yourself. So I do nude ritual, and we have had like some witches, not just Wiccans, other pagans too, use nude ritual. It's called skyclad. And some people use it and some people detest it. It depends on, first of all, your relationship with nudity. And it's not mandatory. It depends on your coven, on your practice. It's very up to you. You don't have to do it. But I love it. I love the way energy feels on my body when I'm not clothed. You know, I love the natural state. I think the naked state is the natural human state, the most beautiful state. I love being nude. I'm Aquarius, so we love being nude. So it right up my alley. But not all witches do it, but a lot of us do. Number two, they had they mentioned two of the most popular, famous tarot decks of all time. Any witch that does tarot, or any person that does tarot, knows the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith. If a person doesn't know those two decks, I question if they doing tarot at all, to be honest with you. Because if you do 5 seconds of research, both of those decks come up. Because every deck is based on one or those two decks. It's like they were the originals. Those are the models. The Rider-Waite-Smith and then the Thoth deck. Those are the models. Every deck I have next to me is based on one of those two decks. And they showed you the Rider-Waite-Smith. She's using it in the film, which was cool. And the Thoth deck they mentioned because a lot of the art that's in her apartment is based on scenes from the Thoth deck, according to the script. I couldn't tell if it really was or not because I didn't look, you know, closely enough at the paintings. But she had paintings all over the apartment, and they were full of all kinds of like symbols. They also mentioned the Celtic cross, which is one of the most, if not the most famous tarot spread. The spread is how you lay out the cards. And the Celtic cross, almost all of us learn that first. So it's one of the most famous, you know, even if you don't learn it first, most of us come across it. She wears a lot of red. I like that she wore red and she had her bedroom sheets in red because it shows the color correspondences. In magic, we use color correspondences. Depending upon what you're trying to do, you match the colors. So if you're trying to do love magic, you're going to use red candles or pink candles sometimes. But most people are going to use love because it ignites the passion. So you're going to use red candles. You're going to use, you know, all kinds of maybe red roses. You're going to use all kinds of color, and it's going to have to do with red. You might even wear red during the ritual, or if you're naked, you might wear red lipstick or red jewelry, you know, red crystals, things like that. So she used a lot of red, and that was perfect because it corresponded with the magic that she was trying to do. The apartment is decorated with tarot and witchcraft symbols. I loved it. The paintings were actual scenes from tarot cards or pieces of a card or something like that. The ones that I pointed out, I saw the maiden, the mother, and the crone. So you see, like, those symbols are very prominent in craft. You saw the pentagram, earth, air, fire, water, spirit. You saw that, you know, several places in the home. So you saw a lot of actual symbols that witches actually use. So that part was cool too. I love the apartment. I would stay in that apartment. The apartment was gorgeous. There was candles everywhere, but not too many candles. Some of these movies have so many candles that I'm like, that would set off the sprinkler system. But in this case, it wasn't too many, so that was cool. There was a woman playing the harp, and she had on a flower crown. And I loved it because we often wear flower crowns. I thought that was so beautiful. Now, let me tell you some of the things that she had that we use every day. She had herbs, she had crystals, she had crystal balls, she had a bell, she had candles, oils, an altar, a cauldron, and she made natural soaps. She also made Mojo Bags. Mojo Bags are basically a little bag, and you put inside of it your corresponding elements. So let's say for love, you would put in crystals that draw love. For instance, rose quartz. You would put inside herbs that draw love. For instance, basil. Some people use different ones, orris root, a whole bunch of different ones, but you put a couple different ones of those in there. You might put inside of it, you might rub it down with love oil. You might put a piece of your hair in it. The purpose is to draw love to you, and then you would carry this Mojo bag around. You can do it for money, you can do it for protection, you can do it for a number of different magical reasons. And she had them and she made them, and I see them all the time. She also had poppets, and she made poppets, and she used poppets on her victims. What is a poppet? A poppet is basically a voodoo doll, but we don't use the term voodoo doll. Voodoo doll is specific to New Orleans. That is their term. That's their thing. Before that, they were called poppets, and that's what people use. Poppets, or some people call them dollies, but it's the same thing. They make them out of fabric, or they make them out of wax. You can make them out of a number of different things, but basically you make it into the image of the person, maybe put some of their hair in it if you have some of their hair, and you use that poppet to represent the person. And she was doing that in the movie and doing candle magic and giving these men potions to make them fall in love with her. Let me see, what else did I like? I like that she was calling upon the goddess. They had several scenes where they did rituals, and they always called upon the goddess, called upon the Lord and Lady, the God and Goddess. So I thought that part was cool. There was a spiritual shop in it. It's called the Magical Apothecary. We do shop at places like this, spiritual shops, apothecaries. Everybody doesn't. Some people get their stuff on Amazon. Some people grow their own herbs and stuff and make their own oils. Everybody's a little bit different, but many of us do use these spiritual shops, and you see them all over the world. I've seen them. I can't say I've seen them all over the world. I've seen them all over the States, put it like that. And I've seen them in Costa Rica too. It just depends on where you are. She was also able to read energy, which I thought was really cool that she could read energy, because most of us have some kind of sixth sense. And she was able to read people just by looking at them and tell what they liked or what they were into, that kind of thing. And she used it to manipulate people, which was the sad part about it. She was very gifted. This particular character, even though I don't like her, she was gifted and she was smart. I don't like her because she was callous and manipulative, and she killed these people without remorse. Men were magically drawn to her, and they didn't know why, but it was because she was wearing love potions. She was making them, and she was putting them in her makeup and in her oils, and I do that myself. I don't wear them often, though, and it is very common for us to do. I just don't wear them because I'm not working on manifesting love. But when I was working on them, I used to wear them all the time, and they do draw all kinds of energy. They're kind of like aphrodisiacs. So you will find people coming to you more frequently. She also made potions. We all make potions if we choose to. And her potions were love potions, and she put them in their drink, and she also did love magic with candles and things along those lines. The potions, she basically put herbs in them to make them hallucinate, basically make them susceptible so she could play games with their mind. So that was her thing. She used her body fluids in her spells. We do use our body fluids in our spells. Not always, but you can use urine, you can use blood, you can use hair. Well, there's not a fluid, but you can use anything personal like hair, fingernails, eyelashes, you know, breast milk. You can use any of that kind of stuff in your spells, because basically what happens is that, like in her case, she was trying to give him a piece of her. He was dead, and she was putting a piece of her with him. So she used her urine and her blood, and that's what she gave him, her energy. But it was just like, after she done murdered the poor man. They used Wiccan greetings and Wiccan departures. Sometimes Wiccans will say, "Marry me," when they meet each other. And when they walk away, they'll say, "Merry part." And sometimes they will say, "Brightest blessings." There are also other greetings and endings, but those are the ones you hear the most often. In the movie, they discuss sigil magic, sex magic. Both of those two things are real forms of magic. They also had a lot of jewelry, which is where a lot of jewelry, because what you see on our jewelry, people don't realize, are crystals. So the purpose in wearing jewelry with these big crystals is for the energy. We use the energy for different things. And she had on a lot of different jewelry, beautiful pieces, and they really are used by priestesses and by witches. They're used a lot. And also shaman. I've seen shaman with them. I've seen a lot of different magical people using jewelry with crystals in it. She went to a coven meeting several times. Witches do form covens when they want to. You don't have to. And they're all different because your coven is governed by the people involved. So they have different things, some similar things. But she went to a coven meeting. And she gave him something called devil's weed. I had to Google it because I had heard of it, but I had never read about what it was for. Come to find out, it's a real herb that she gave him, and the purpose of the herb is to make people hallucinate, and that's what she was giving it to these men for. She also made a witch bottle, and we do make witch bottles, but I didn't understand her witch bottle because our witch bottles are for protection. So you put you would put something of yourself in it, some hair or some urine or something of yourself in it. And you would put like sharp things in it. It's a protection bottle. And you take the witch bottle and you bury it somewhere in your home, you know, usually under the floorboards or in the ceiling or something like that. But it's usually for protection. She used hers. She put her self into it, her urine and her blood into it, and left the bottle with the guy and was like, now I'll always be with you. And it was like, this is the same guy you just murdered. And why would you murder somebody, bury them in the backyard, and then leave your DNA with the dead body? Like, that did not make sense to me at all. She left her DNA all over his home. And that's what gave me the real impression, like, this woman is really crazy. Because nobody in their right mind would leave their DNA with their victim. So that was really unusual. They mentioned the Pagan Holidays. They mentioned Samhain, which is Halloween. They mentioned the solstice. They mentioned a lot of different holidays, which witches and different people from different cultures actually practice. So that was kind of cool too. They mentioned the Wiccan Reed, which is about doing harm to others, not doing harm to others, basically, even though she is harming others. Most Wiccans, not all Wiccans, but some Wiccans believe in the Wiccan Reed, which is to do no harm. They don't all, but many of them do. So I was like, how is she Wiccan and she doing so much harm? So her behavior was awful. The movie mentioned astrology, which we do really use. The love spells had a bad effect on her victims, and this is true. I've done a love spell more than one time, and the person got obsessive, jealous, crazy, out of control. And that happens a lot when you do a love spell, because the person, they didn't fall in love with you slowly and organically. So the energy of the vibration can be too much for them. So sometimes they'll start to act awful. They did a hand fasting ritual, a mock hand fasting ritual. A hand fasting is a Wiccan wedding. And maybe some other pagan groups might use it too. In the African American community, we do something called jumping the broom. It reminds me a lot of that. It's basically just a spiritual ceremony between two people who want to be together. She did something really cool. She enchanted her makeup. And I thought that was really cool because I never really thought about it, but it's pretty easy to do. You can enchant makeup, you can enchant paint and paint pictures with it. Basically, you just have to put the right herbs and the right consistency into it. So when her property manager broke into her apartment, or she came in her apartment, she was playing in her makeup and she was getting like woozy. And I was like, oh shit, she enchanted her makeup. So that was really cool. And I thought about it. I was like, I could do that. That's kind of cool. Put some love herbs and some lipstick, you know, which is basically what she did. The lipstick, and she did the eyeshadow, I believe. And I think she did some soap, and she made some like lotion, and they were all enchanted. So it was really cool. I enchant my oils, and I used to sell them at my Etsy shop. And I still do use them a lot, and I still sell them sometimes. But basically, that's what she was doing. She was enchanting things. So I thought that was really cool. The witchcraft was empowering for the men and women involved. It was very empowering for all of them, all the ones, the witches that you saw present. Even her, it's just that the power went weird. It went kind of left, you know, because I like for a woman to be empowered. I think that's wonderful. But then, you know, you're going to use the magic to turn the tables on men. I'm okay with you taking your power, but why do you have to become abusive with your power? Why do you have to become murderous with your power? Why do you have to sleep with your property manager's husband and draw him and you know, draw him, or not so much draw him, but basically she just kept on giving him this potion and doing these spells on him and having sex with him, and just drove him crazy. So I was just like, I like the fact that you're feeling your feminine power, because they were exploring it through dance and things like that. I love that kind of stuff. And I believe that all of that has to do with goddess energy. But once you start abusing it, you're just as bad as the patriarchy. So I can't go there. And the last thing was questioning the dynamics of love, sex, and gender dynamics. The whole movie questioned love, is it real, sex, and gender dynamics. The whole movie was questioning that, and I love that aspect as well. So that was cool too. So the bottom line, I have to give this movie a A+. I have to give this movie a perfect score, 100%. But I didn't like this movie. The movie was awful, but it is true witchcraft. And there are some witches who could choose to be this manipulative and this awful. Okay? All right, guys. If you want to check out this movie, some of you may actually like it. You know, some of you may think it's funny because they said some people see it as a comedy. So some of you might think it's really funny. But as you're watching it, just remember that all these things could really happen. All right, guys. I'm going to see you next week with another episode of The Witch Trials. See you later.